So, Michael, I'll start, and you raise your hand if you have, if you have a question. Michael, you took 10 years. It was your idea to make a Batman movie, and it took 10 years to make it happen. Why you wanted to make this movie, and why it took 10 years?
Well, Julia, you are looking at an authentic comic book geek. By the time I graduated high school, I had over 30,000 comic books dating back to 1936 that filled my mom and dad's entire garage. They never once got a car in their garage. I went to the first comic book convention ever held on the planet Earth. And the comic books were my life. Superheroes were my life growing up. And nobody was more powerful to me than the least powerful superhero, Batman. I think because he was human, I could relate to him. I could identify with him much more than I could with Superman or the Hulk. And I became the boy who loved Batman. And as I was growing up, as fandom was beginning to start, I realized that almost all the creators of the comic book superheroes from the 30s to the 60s lived in New Jersey, Manhattan, or Long Island. And God bless my dad, who worked 6 days a week as a stonemason. He would take me on his Sundays and drive me to their homes, and I would arrange to interview them for fanzines. So I got to know the creators, and they told me face to face how they created these amazing characters. And it was important to me on two levels. Number one, in that cold night in January 1966, when the Batman TV show came on the air, I was so excited until I realized, oh my God, it's a comedy. They're treating Batman like a joke. The whole world is laughing at Batman, and that just kind of killed me. So my vow that night, I made a vow in my basement den, like Bruce Wayne made a vow when he saw his slaughtered parents' bodies in the street. And my parents were safe upstairs in the kitchen. I said, somehow, someday, I am going to show the world the true Batman, the Dark Knight, the way he was created by Bill Finger and by Bob Kane in 1939. So it was about restoring the dignity and integrity to the character, and also bringing attention to the creators. That was very important to me.
Why did you want to bring attention to the creators? And I mean, no, please respond.
I was a kid growing up in the 50s and 60s, and a not so funny thing happened circa 1954. A book came out called Seduction of the Innocent that blamed comic books as being the cause of the post World War II rise of juvenile delinquency in America. Dr. Frederick Wortham had interviewed 100 juvenile delinquents. They told him, yes, they had all read a comic book. Therefore, Dr. Wortham concluded that comic books caused juvenile delinquency. He warned parents and teachers and tea parties that if they let their kids read comic books, if they were if they ever read a Batman and Robin comic book, their children would turn into homosexuals. And if the kids read their comic books indoors, they would develop asthma because they weren't playing outside in the fresh air. And society bought it. And comic books, there were comic book burnings all over America. Not like that could happen today. Um, but those were the times. So comic books were being blamed. Uh, the people who created them, the artists, the writers, the editors, couldn't publicly say that they were in the comic book business. They were being shunned by neighbors. They were being shunned by folks in New York. They were being shut out of various businesses. It was a very, very dark time for the creators of our great contemporary American mythology.
And before we go to Batman itself, beside fighting to make this movie for all this time, you did something at University of Indiana, to nobilitate the art of comic book writing and designing.
Well, Julia, I was looking for any opportunity to get my foot in the door in the world of comic books or movies or animation. Again, a blue collar kid from New Jersey. I had no relatives in these businesses. I didn't know anybody in these businesses. All I had was a head full of big dreams and a passion that was really coursing through my veins. I could feel it burning in me. When I was at Indiana in the early 70s, the College of Arts and Sciences had an experimental curriculum department. And it was if you had an idea for a course that had never been taught at any college before and could get the backing of a department on campus, you could appear before a dean and a panel of professors and pitch it. If the dean approved it, you could teach it, even though I was an undergrad. I was a junior for 3 hours of credit. So I went in there. I got the backing of the folklore department. They agreed with me that it doesn't matter if we call our superheroes King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table or the Avengers. It's the same story of brave heroes battling the demons and dragons of their day. So I went into pitch. The dean immediately shut me down. He says, "You're not going to teach a course on funny books in my university." And I said, "Dean, may I just ask you two questions before you throw me out?" He says, "Go ahead." I said, "Are you familiar with the story of Moses?" He looked at me like I was crazy. He said, "Yeah, so?" I said, "So, Dean, very, very briefly, could you summarize the story of Moses for me?" He said, "I don't know what game you're playing here, Mr. Uslan, but I'll play it with you." He said, "The Hebrew people were being persecuted, their firstborn were being slain. Hebrew couple placed their infant son in a little wicker basket, send him down the river Nile. There he's discovered by an Egyptian family who raised them as their own son. When he grows up and learns of his true heritage, he becomes a great hero." I said, "Stop. That was great. Do you have any recollection of the origin of Superman?" He said, "Of course, the planet Krypton was about to blow up. A scientist and his wife place their infant son in a little rocket ship and send him to Earth. There he's discovered by the Kents, who raise him as their own son. And with that, he stops, stares at me for what I swear was an eternity, and says, 'Your course is accredited.'" And that was it.
I want to go to talk a little bit about what was important. What were the ingredients from the Batman universe, mythology, and the stories that were important for this particular film? And I want to start with the fact that I believe that, well, Joker was one of your favorite villains, but also you had the idea of Jack Nicholson in the movie, right?
Guilty.
Yeah, many years before the movie was made.
Yes, 1980, May 1980. It was Memorial Weekend. It was a hot afternoon. I get on the bus to head back to New Jersey, and I open up the Post and the movie section. There's two movies opening up: The Empire Strikes Back and a horror movie called The Shining. And there, for the first time, I see this picture of Jack Nicholson, this maniacal picture of him peering around a corner looking totally crazy. It's now known as the "Here's Johnny" shot. It's very iconic. I tore it out of the newspaper. As soon as I got home, I ran to my desk. I took whiteout. Does everybody there remember whiteout?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I took whiteout. I whited out Jack's face. I took a red pen. I did his lips. I took a magic marker. I did his hair. And I never save anything. Okay. I never save it. I mean, I save everything. I never throw out anything. This is the actual thing that I did that day. And this is what I showed everybody at the studio and ultimately Tim Burton. And the day Jack Nicholson was hired was like the greatest day of my career to that point.
And the stories. Can you tell us what are some of the stories that were important? I mean, for creating this particular film and the storyline of the film.
I can. There are certain things that are essential to Batman. Number one is that he is human. And we have to keep going back to that and his humanity. Number two is that his origin story about seeing his parents murdered before his eyes as a kid and then making the vow that he's going to spend the rest of his life getting the guy who did this, getting all the bad guys, even if he has to walk through hell for the rest of his life in order to do it, which turned him into the Dark Knight, an urban legend. That origin story was absolutely essential. Number three, Stan Lee, my mentor and friend, who co-created the pantheon of Marvel superheroes, always taught me his theory of supervillains. He said, "Michael, always remember that the supervillains are just as important as the superheroes because ultimately they define the superheroes." And Batman has had the greatest rogues gallery of supervillains in history, and inarguably, the Joker being the greatest supervillain ever created. In a recent cinema poll, the top three cinema villains of all time were the Wicked Witch of the West, Darth Vader, and the Joker. And that's pretty darn good. The last thing, Julia, of course, is the car, the magic of the car. It's incredible.
The car.
Yeah.
And can you take us a little bit? Um, Actually, no. I want to go back to something that connects to what you were just talking about. This film, as we were discussing upstairs, it's it's not the first superhero film, but it is, as you said, the first dark one, and also I believe in my memory the one that really jump started a whole wave of big colossal superhero films, both in the DC comic universe and in the Marvel comic. Is that true? And what are the consequences?
It is very true. And yes, first of all, let's all give credit to Dick Donner for those first two Superman movies, which were spectacular. But even DC Comics itself believed that only Superman had the potential of all comic book superheroes to be made into a blockbuster movie. Nothing else had value. That's what the times were back then in the 70s. And we had to prove differently. We had to prove differently. And our breakthrough came, and it directly impacted the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Stan Lee told me so. Our breakthrough came with Tim Burton. Here we had this young genius animator from Disney who came in and at that point had just done Beetlejuice and Pee Wee's Big Adventure for Warner Brothers. And it was Tim who had what I always describe as, quote, the big idea, unquote. Tim's big idea, which revolutionized cinema, comic books, superheroes, and the world culture's perception of comic books and superheroes, was simply this. He said, if we are going to do the first truly dark and serious comic book superhero movie, and if we don't want to get unintentional laughs from the audience, this movie, he said, Michael, cannot be about Batman, which is when I like fell apart and melted into the street. But then he said, this movie must be about Bruce Wayne. Ah, we had to show a driven, obsessed Bruce Wayne, driven to the point of being psychotic, that audiences around the world would say, oh, yeah, that's a guy who would get dressed up as a bat and go out and fight a guy who looks like the Joker. And Tim's corollary to the big idea was world building. From the opening frames of this movie, we had to make Gotham City the third most important character in the film. And we had to make audiences suspend their disbelief, believe in Gotham City before they could believe in a guy like Batman fighting a guy like the Joker. And that has made all the difference. So what Stan Lee told me was there would be no Marvel Cinematic Universe without this. He said, Michael, think about it. We kicked off with some very, very successful Iron Man movies. Those Iron Man movies really should have been entitled Tony Stark. Our Spider-Man movies really should be called Peter Parker. It was Tim Burton's big idea. It was Batman 1989 that opened the floodgates for all the followed.
And do you think that the follow has improved? As how did you see the evolution of the comic, of the big Hollywood comic book? If you can generalize, I mean, I understand it's a generic question, but
Yeah, well, Hollywood's always been really, really good at killing the goose that laid the golden egg. If something's successful, they will oversaturate a marketplace between movies, TV, animation, games, blah, blah, blah. What we need to do is what Marvel and DC do best. And that is when they do not make cookie cutter movies, do not simply pour out more and more of the same and oversaturate a marketplace with it. It's when they are willing to be bold and daring and push the envelope. Case in point for Marvel, Guardians of the Galaxy, Deadpool. These really truly push the envelope into new arenas. Over at DC, I have to say that Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy was incredible. When audiences walked out of those movies, they no longer had to say, gee, that was a great comic book movie. Finally, they could just say that was a great film. And that's followed with Matt Reeves. It's followed in animation with Bruce Timm. And I have to say, it is following with the genius work of Todd Phillips, who gave us Joker. And any minute now, will be giving us Joker Folie à Deux, which is bold, it's daring, it's unprecedented, and in my estimation, a masterpiece of cinema.
I completely agree, and we are opening the Joker Foliado next week here.
Oh,
And
great.
can you, if you can, explain to our audience a little bit about the evolution of the franchise through their main filmmakers, not all of the episodes, but the way that the identity that these individual filmmakers brought to until today, including Todd Phillips?
Well, we start with Tim Burton. Tim had to restore the darkness and dignity to Batman. He envisioned it as only Tim Burton could. Gotham City was built on 5 square city blocks at the back lot of Pinewood Studios in London. It was an era in our history when it was kind of good versus evil, black and white. Everything was pretty clear. The Joker was the clown prince of crime. Well, when Chris Nolan came into it, once again, his job was to restore the darkness and dignity of the Batman, where there had been a loss for a few movies. The reason there was a loss for a few movies was there were some elements of the studio that became extremely enamored with merchandising and Happy Meals and wanted Batman movies to be lighter, brighter, kiddie friendly, family friendly, toy company friendly. Hey, how about 3 heroes and 3 villains in every movie with 2 costume changes and 2 vehicles for each one? The trouble you run into there is the tail wags the dog, and you start making 2-hour infomercials for toys instead of making great films that might otherwise just sell toys because they're great films. So when Chris came in, he had to do the same thing as Tim, but did it from a completely opposite point of view. He wanted to make all of us in a post 9/11 world believe this was real. The world was now gray. No more good versus evil. It was order versus chaos. And he wanted us to believe in Gotham City. So he shot it in Chicago, where not New York. Had he taken New York, the second you would have seen Times Square or the Statue of Liberty go, it's New York, and it breaks the suspension of disbelief. Chicago, you take a couple of buildings out of the skyline, people around the world can't even identify it. So Gotham City came to life in a real sense. Christian Bale with Chris Nolan created a portrayal of Bruce Wayne, post-traumatic stress syndrome on a lost horizon journey of self-discovery. You kind of believe this guy could put on the armor and go out and do this. And the Joker was now a modern day terrorist on the heels of 9/11. He placed no value on human life whatsoever. And he was scary. Heath Ledger, again, the performance of a lifetime, was scary. And maybe the toughest job Christopher Nolan had to do was to convince all of you that all the gadgets and the gimmicks and the tech were absolutely real. And I said, how's he going to do that? Well, he hired Morgan Freeman to tell you it was real. And if Morgan Freeman says it's true, by God, it's true. And that was amazing. And now we have Matt Reeves doing the Batman Part 1 and the Batman Part 2, which is bridged by the Penguin series on TV. And there you're getting, finally, after all these years, you're seeing Batman cerebrally as the world's greatest detective. You're seeing a very, very dark detective side of it all. And I think it's thrilling and outstanding. It's the way Batman was created in, of all things, detective comics. So that's been a thrill to watch. And that's led us right to Todd Phillips and Joker. So it's just been a stunning journey. And it proves that if you have filmmakers who love a character, know a character, are passionate about a character, and they have a vision for a character, and you believe they know how to execute that vision, everybody stand back and let them do what they can do. And it's been marvelous. Well, I guess I'm not supposed to use the word marvelous talking about DC. It's been wonderful.
Well, you talk about being passionate. You wrote a book. Your book is called The Boy Who Loved Batman, and it's a wonderful read. I highly recommend it. And it's just been turned into a play that the Netherlander is producing. It opens tomorrow in Tampa, right?
It opens Wednesday
Wednesday.
at the Strass Center for the Performing Arts in Tampa. We'll be running there till November 10th. Dan Fogler is playing me. Dan was the co-star of the Harry Potter sequels, Fantastic Beasts, a regular on The Walking Dead, and played Francis Ford Coppola in the Paramount Plus series The Offer about the making of The Godfather. Dan is also in the upcoming movie A Complete Unknown, which is getting a lot of Oscar buzz, the story of Bob Dylan. It opens Christmas time. So we'll be playing in Tampa until November 10th. And then the Nederlanders have informed me after that, they will be opening us in London next. En route, we all hope, to Broadway.
where we hope to see you. If you have any question, raise your hand. There is one right there.
I watched the Adam West series. That was fine for me growing up. I loved this movie when it came out, and I had a little bit of reluctance, which was I thought, having seen what Heath Ledger and Joaquin Phoenix did with Joker, that seeing this again, it relative to those performances would feel campy. It felt dark at the time relative to the TV series, but I was worried coming back to this that it would just feel like, yeah, this is not as scary. And I completely loved it. I thought Jack Nicholson was great, and I so enjoyed feeling like I love all of those interpretations of Joker, including Cesar Romero. Like, they're all great in their own way. To me, which just speaks to the depth of these characters and archetypes, which is kind of like Hamlet. There are so many great ways to play it. You don't have to have one performance be the only one or one that makes others obsolete. They're all great. And so it was great to come back to that and be like, yeah, this was fantastic. And the Prince music, which I completely forgot about because I hadn't seen this in about 25 years. So great job. And thanks for sharing your story.
I really appreciate that. Thank you for that. And I have to add that, people always ask me, who's your favorite Batman? And I keep telling them, you're asking me the wrong question. It's really, who's your favorite Bruce Wayne? Because the Batmans aren't all that different, but the Bruce Waynes are totally different. And one of the ones who needs to be recognized is Kevin Conroy. And on the Joker side, it's Mark Hamill. These two fine actors and fine human beings absolutely nailed and defined the voice, in Kevin's case, the voice of Batman and the voice of Bruce Wayne. And with Mark, defined the laugh and the voice of the Joker. I told Mark, if we ever build a Mount Rushmore to the Joker, it will be Jack Nicholson, Heath Ledger, Joaquin Phoenix, and Mark Hamill. But to add to your point, let's see if we can't slide Cesar Romero in there somewhere.
There's one right there. Oh, yeah, hold on.
Hi, thank you so much for even being here. I really appreciate you coming on and letting us spend a Saturday evening with you. So this is great. I'm Anya, and I'm going to let you know I have never seen a Batman movie. I have never read a comic
You're the
book.
one.
Yes, I'm the one. I've never seen a comic book in my life, and I'm very young, if you can tell by my voice. So this was really fun for me because this was going into an open book that I actually had no knowledge of anything. My friend next to me, he was like showing me pictures of Quizzler and Penguin and all these other guys. So this is, I'm very open book here. And I wanted to say, I thought the movie was great. I really, really enjoyed it. And the thing that I guess as a newbie for me that really, I was in the restroom and there was another lady right here who's never seen Batman, right? Is that your wife? Did she? Yeah, your wife. She's never seen it either. Yeah, so I'm not the only one in the audience, by the way. So she and it was kind of like I wanted to know about Batman and why, because I've seen Spider-Man. He got bit by a spider. Okay, I was wondering a little bit background story of did he get bit by a bat? And also somebody told me actually in the Sag Harbor Theater, they're like, no, he's facing his demons. And I was like, wow, that's great. I'm a lawyer, and this is a really, really cool because it's coming at a young perspective. And I was just wondering, why is there not more kind of aspects for the younger generation to say, hey, he's Batman, he's fighting, I guess, demons? Because if I'm wrong, please tell me, because I don't know anything, that he's afraid of bats, I believe. So that's why he became Batman, was to fight his fears. So if so, that is such a really cool thing. And how do we work on younger generations we had little teeny kids in the audience this evening that I think went to bed. And this is such a great thing. Batman's not he's cool, and he fights fears. He fights, basically, and his whole thing is, I don't kill. I protect. So I think that's great in the criminal justice system that I work in, of how do we actually make this more centralized, so that way Batman always stays in the circle of the criminal justice system and with next generations.
Anya, is that right, Anya?
Yes.
I'm also a lawyer, so don't hold that against me. However, first of all, I'm going to make a recommendation to you. I would love for you to go to streaming and find our movie Batman Begins. And when you see Batman Begins, which is a masterpiece by Christopher Nolan, leading into The Dark Knight, it's a trilogy, The Dark Knight and then The Dark Knight Rises. First of all, I think you will absolutely love that trilogy. It really, truly is one movie told in 3 acts, beautifully structured. And Batman Begins will answer all your questions about how the bats figure into Bruce's life and how he was so terrified of them as a child and how he conquered that fear, what he did. It's truly an amazing story that applies to all of us. It goes back to the idea of his humanity. And we all have our demons, we do. And we all have to overcome our fears. So much of the Batman legend and lore deals with fears. That's why he turned it around on the villains. And he puts on the cloak of this monstrous dark bat, and he's the spirit of good. And he has a motto he lives by. He does not kill. It's really, really quite a wonderful thing. And if you look at the Joker, it's a thin line between the two of them. Here you have this monstrous evil, but in the guise of a clown. And it's like Edgar Allan Poe's Cask of Amontillado, that the horror seething below the surface. And truly, after Bruce Wayne was traumatized witnessing the murder of his parents, he could have gone the dark side. But it was Alfred and some others who anchored him to his humanity. And kept him from going the dark side. It's really, really quite an exceptional story that people all over the world have identified with, and it transcends borders. It has an impact in terms of cultures as well. So I think that's the emis of it. The last thing I want to address is there are now many different versions of Batman. So we can start our kids on Batman meets Scooby-Doo, the animated movies. We can then progress them to the Lego movie and the Lego Batman movie. We can bring them to Batman Brave and Bold, the animated series for younger people, and get their feet wet. And then we can slowly turn up the heat. Oh, and by the way, the original Adam West TV series, that's great for little kids. It really is great for little kids. So, and then we get them into our movies and into the comic books, into the graphic novels, the video games. But it's a process. But there's enough material out there aimed at different age groups that any child can take the lifelong ride. Right now, I have a 3-year-old grandson, and one of his favorite things on TV is the animated series Bat Wheels. Yes, even the Batmobile has its own TV series. So they're out there, I promise you.
Okay, we have time. We have just one, and then the other one. Then
Thank you for being here, first of all. In the course of Jack Nicholson playing that role, from just figuring from before he read the script or had a script to much later doing a series like this, has he changed his personality? Could you see him digging in and actually becoming a different person, not just for the role, but he himself? Because it seems like an opportunity for an actor like that.
Wow, that's an intense question. I wish I could answer, but I'm afraid only Jack could answer that for you. I will say this. Jack took on the role because of Tim Burton, and Tim deserves all the credit for it. When he met with Tim and Tim provided his vision for it and his vision for the Joker, and the two of them worked together to create, to craft that character. And Jack was given a lot of free reins, to make it his own and to add to things that just were not in the script at all. It was the same way with Heath Ledger and Chris Nolan. So there's so much of Jack that went into it, and so much of Tim Burton that went into it. And I wish I could answer it in more detail, but I think that was really just strictly between those two gentlemen.
We have time for the last one.
I remember at the time that it came out, there was some controversy about choosing Michael Keaton for the role, and I think he was great. And what I particularly enjoyed was after seeing how many superhero movies where there's all of this stuff about the training that the actor does to like get the superhero body and like all the sort of stuff with Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale and how jacked up and the whole thing, and you see Michael Keaton, he's like, he's fit, but that's like he's like a regular body, he's not this supersized, jacked up, muscle man, and I think that just makes it all work better because it makes what he's doing as Batman that much more impressive because he, and I just, it was nice to come back to that sort of normal size Bruce Wayne, and I think that was a bold choice at the time, and I think it still works, 40 years later or whatever it is.
You were, Michael, you were skeptical, right? When you heard there was that Tim Burton was thinking about Michael Keaton.
I had already been working on this project for 7.5 years when the executive from the studio calls me and says, so what do you think of Tim's new idea? I said, what's that? He goes, Michael Keaton to play Batman. I go, well, that's a funny joke. I said, that's hysterical. I could see the posters now. Mr. Mom is Batman. Yeah, I've only been spending 7.5 years to make a dark and serious Batman movie. He goes, Michael, I'm not kidding. I said, yes, you are. He says, no, I'm not. I mean, it took him 20 minutes to convince me this wasn't a joke. And it was only when I talked to Tim who explained it to me. And, I remember at the time, there was a list of all the serious actors of the day who could play Batman. Dennis Quaid, Harrison Ford, Kevin Costner. There was a long list. And Tim said, I do not know how to show any of them getting into a bat suit without getting unintentional laughs from the audience. But with Michael Keaton, whom he said he worked with on Beetlejuice, I know we can create a portrayal of Bruce Wayne that will make everybody out there believe he will get into that suit and that will work. And that was part of the essential magic of that first Batman movie working. After Michael, like the walls fell down, you could almost anybody then you could bring in, and you could go in and the filmmakers did. They went in many, many different directions when you think about it. Ben Affleck playing Bruce Wayne in his mid-40s. He's frustrated, done with it, doesn't want to go back, is being dragged in, kicking and screaming, and he's bitter. Then you have Robert Pattinson as Bruce Wayne, just kind of starting out, still tripping over his feet, not even sure what his mission is yet. Is it purely vengeance or is it justice? And you get to see an evolution of the Bruce Waynes over a number of movies. That's really, really incredible. But I agree with you that in its inception, it was all about Michael Keaton. And when I challenged it, Tim said, I can cheat the musculature. I can carve it into the uniform. I can cheat his height. But you can't cheat his authenticity that people are going to be able to relate to. You can't cheat his quirkiness that they're going to respond to. And that was all part of the magic. And the last part of it, I would say, was the brilliant, I think the best marketing campaign in the history of cinema, when in that magical summer of 1989, when the billboards, gigantic billboards, including Times Square, went up all over it, posters went out, and there was no mention of the title of the movie. All it had was a black bat in a gold oval, and it said June 23rd. but everyone on the planet seemed to know what was coming. That was brilliant. You could not walk 20 steps through Times Square in June of 1989 without seeing someone in a Batman hat or a Batman t-shirt. The Batmania was crazy. And yes, we were inundated. We got petitions from fans that I thought they were going to surround the studio with pitchforks and torches. They were so upset. And this is before social media. There were no computers or anything. This was just TV, radio, newspapers. The Wall Street Journal did, if I recall, a front page story on the travesty of Michael Keaton being hired to do Batman, and Warner's was really going to get blasted for it. It was unbelievable what was taking place. And only when everyone saw the first trailer, which was rushed out, it was a 2-3 minute trailer, and they saw the Batmobile and they saw Batman in action, and they saw the Joker, that they realized, oh, wait a minute, maybe we should see these movies before we start to criticize them and claim they are awful and we should boycott them. But that was the setting, and it was an incredible moment in time.
And I think, and to close it, because we're late, I think that Tim Burton, this film was essential, and Tim Burton aesthetic was essential for that transition to the comic book style, stylization, which is a word I can never pronounce. But yes, but the visual, and to bring back the idea of the comic book, the beauty and the colors and the framing, and then moving into a more naturalistic, vision later on till today.
Giulia, I will close with this. Every single genre movie to opening last night, you can still see in everyone the influence of Tim Burton's vision from 1989. You can still see the impact of our genius production designer, Anton Furst, of his design work. Anton designed Gotham City, the Batmobile, the whole look of the picture. To this very day, Genius 3, Danny Elfman, you can still hear his notes reverberating in the themes from everyone from Hans Zimmer on up and down. The influence and impact that these people had, that this movie has had on now it's multiple generations of filmmakers and audiences, has really been incredible. And I just want to make sure that they get all the credit for that.
And I just want to make sure that you all come and see Joker Foliedo, because it is beautiful. It really is a beauty. Michael, I can't thank you enough. I know you're leaving tomorrow morning, so it's been real special having you. And this will be on our YouTube channel. And thank you again for illuminating us on Batman.
Thanks, Giulia. Thank you, everybody. Thanks.